being here. We're going to, should we introduce everybody here on the board? And I am Bruce Danielson. I've been asked to be chairman of the group. And we'll start down here on the left with...
I'm Deborah Ellefson.
One, two, three, four, five.
Don't push any buttons.
no,
Don't.
My hands are staying above the table.
The panic buttons are
And I believe you were had just had a motion to approve the agenda.
Yes. And Lori made the motion, and Deborah seconded. Then,
All in favor?
all in favor? Say aye. The second item is the approval of the minutes from the December 19th, 2014 meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I just yesterday reviewing these noticed something that needs to be corrected. On the very last page, the paragraph about the State Board of Elections says incoming Secretary of State Chantel Krebs will reappoint the board. That's not the case. The Secretary of State does not appoint the Board of Elections. They continue on. They're appointed by legislative leaders, and the county auditors nominate some as well. So just take out that one sentence.
Okay, will do.
Does anybody else have any other comments on? Is there a motion to accept the meeting minutes from the?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
The next item on the agenda is the discussion of the auditor's office absentee ballot distribution, collection, and counting process. And this will be in here. What we would like to do is just ask for the, we're going to have a discussion, public can enter into the discussion, and what we would like to cover here is how the process is actually accomplished, and we'll have an open discussion after we've been downstairs to discuss problems that we had that day. And is there anybody here that would like to start the discussion? We have on the day of the election and prior to the election, and we're going to ask that people can bring up the first how the absentee ballots are distributed. Does everybody on the board here and in the audience understand where we're going with the process? There was discussions about how it's done, Sue, you're the expert in,
Do you have staff here from the auditor's office?
could the staff
They
come up
could
and
tell
help us out and guide us through the process of
That'd be great, yeah.
distributing the absentee ballots?
Are you meaning prior to election day?
Yes,
or
just
when we do
the
election
basic
day?
process of when somebody requests an absentee ballot, we just like to put on the record how they go about asking for an absentee ballot, what the staff does to prepare the absentee ballot, then how it's mailed to them, et cetera.
Okay. Anybody can request for an absentee ballot. They will fill out a form. Some write letters, some come into the office. Just kind of depends on how they go about doing it. They will send in their mail. It will either have to be notarized or a copy of their ID along with that paperwork. They request where they want the ballot sent to. We then will send it to them, and then they will receive it. It comes back to us with another envelope that had gone along with that, where they have to sign the back. And then we will receive that, and then it gets processed that we had received it and counted as voted.
Can I stop you for just one moment?
You bet.
Could you identify yourself
Yes,
so
I'm
we
Heather
have it on
Irwin,
the record?
with the auditor's office.
All right, Heather Irwin.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How do you identify which ballot you mail out
How do we identify?
to, to each voter?
In the system, we enter it, we look up the voter, we put it, process it, and then we print labels. On the labels, it goes by their precinct, their party, depends on which election you're going for. Going for a primary, it's gonna obviously go off of their party. If it's just like a normal general, it goes off of their district or where they're at, and then we base it off all that. And then our total vote now, which is the system we use, will tell you off of that which ballot you get. So district, party, just it kind of depends on each election.
Does the auditor's office have a internal policy manual or any kind of written set of instructions about how to deal with absentee ballots?
A written manual. Ooh. Sue, I guess I
Do
don't
you,
know.
I know you follow the law, and the law
Yeah.
is quite specific as to timelines and how you handle them and how you accept them and so on.
Yeah.
That's probably what you use is state law.
We follow the state law. To request a ballot, it has to be requested within that calendar year. So starting January 1st, like 2015 this year, people could start requesting off of state law. So as of January 1st, people have started to request ballots, and they get held in a held file, and then they're just on hold until that upcoming election. So they check which elections they would like to receive. So if they check that they want everything, it goes in there, and then if that is an election that year, we then process that at the time of that election. So
But
if
for
it's
all of these internal machinations that go on in the auditor's office, though, is it pretty much just,
state law.
I understand the part about state law applying, but what I'm asking about is, you know, you were talking about putting labels in certain envelopes and those things. Do you have a written policy document or a
Total
standard
vote.
operating procedure that you follow for that beyond state law?
Total vote, we're using a new system now. They made a process of how you have to enter it into their system. So yes, there is that document off of Total Vote that is available.
Okay.
Heather, could you explain for everybody what total vote is? We hear these expressions about total vote, e-polling, and
We want Kia, since she's from the Secretary of State, she can kind of a little bit just tell them that it's the voter registration. I mean, it's the database for voters. It's
Well, I've only been in the office for a little over a week, and so that is a new
Yeah.
program since
Not
I was
expert
there
yet?
left in 2010. So I know that it is voter registration is in there, the absentee process, ballot creation, and election night reporting. It's all in one system.
Yep, it's all one system that the entire state now uses. Julie would be able to tell you, because Pennington obviously also uses Total Vote, so.
Yeah, it's a live system, which is different than what we had prior to the implementation of Total Vote. And it produces lists for the candidates. It's a multi-use system that all of the counties use for, like Kia said, voter registration, ballot creation. You can create most of your petitions from that system. It has the street masters from all the counties in it. It's our voter registration system and everything that comes after that. It's the intent of it to get everything programmed into it so that everything from the total election cycle flows. I don't know if campaign finance at the state level is tied into it. That's a different system, but there is that system also.
In the past, the county has used in the elections a computer-based polling book that works off of your set of data from the auditor's office, and the city has used Total Vote to verify voters. So
it's a combined database, if you will, of all the county auditors' lists. It does, technically the Secretary of State does not own the list. It's not their list. They don't maintain it. Each county maintains their portion, their county's list. It's a big distinction of who maintains the list. So it's being maintained by all the county auditors with their specific data. It also lets us check duplicates and move voters from one county to another without them staying registered in more than one county. We also have allowed the Secretary of State, maybe allowed isn't the correct word, but for cross-references to other county for duplicate voters. So it's a good base system, and it actually complies with federal statute, which we weren't before.
Is there, in the Secretary of State's office, is there anybody else that's involved in maintaining the lists? We talked about a company that possibly had been doing some development of the list. Is that company so involved in data transfers or anything?
They developed the software.
Okay.
But each county auditor maintains his or her only voter registration list.
Okay.
It's a central file, if you will, but it's a real clear distinction who maintains that list for responsibility's sake.
Okay. In the bulk uploads that were done from all the different counties, who built the tables for, and I know you're just new in here, but who built the tables for transferring from Minnehaha County versus Lincoln County to go into the total vote system?
I was working at the Secretary of State's office at the time it was getting ready to go online, and they had an algorithm they used to kind of develop street masters for those counties that didn't have them. Julie's County, Pennington, had a really good street master, but for those that didn't, and I think this was mentioned last time, they would take the mass of stuff that came in, and this computer program would look and see, okay, on this street, this range of numbers is in, you have them in this precinct, so we will assume that that is the range. And so they created a street master, but then it came to you for review, didn't
Yes. It came to the counties for review. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that has been one of the issues, and I don't want to digress from what we're talking about, but one of the issues that has been brought up is, where do the errors come in? How do people get wrong absentee ballots? There are two ways they can. One is clerical error in the auditor's office, if they misread the label and accidentally put the wrong ballot in an envelope. The other one is if the database is corrupted in any way.
If it's tied to
Because the way this system works now, the auditor's office does not assign precincts or legislative districts. They put in an address. Total Vote automatically tells it what precinct and other, council district, that sort of thing. And so if Total Vote has errors in it, that's the other way you can get an error.
What kind of safeguards are in place to prevent against clerical errors? For example, Are only 2 people allowed to handle each ballot? Is only 1? Is there a specific assigned person within the office to deal with these? How does all that work?
That's not where the clerical error that she's talking about. What a clerical error means, it's not how the ballot gets to the people that are handling them. That's not usually the error. The error means you walk up, you request an absentee ballot, and I'm the person in the auditor's office handling that, and you just get a wrong ballot, and you as the voter do not verify that it's incorrect.
You pull it out of
a wrong file. Like
file.
you have Keystone, and Keystone's got 2 legislative districts, and you don't notice, you think it said legislative district 30 and it pulled 33. You're going to get human error, I would say rarely, but it does occur. You can't admit that it doesn't, and the voter doesn't know their legislative district information enough to know that. Or in a primary, you hand them the wrong ballot, party-wise.
So how do auditors' offices, specifically in Minnehaha County, safeguard against those kinds of rare problems from happening then? Do they look when the voter comes in, and if they don't know where they live, how do they get helped out? What information or assistance is given to them in order to make sure that they are linked up with the correct absentee ballot?
It's not the voter's error. The information will what happens is the breakdown is between when the label is printed out from total vote and you give them a ballot that's different than that one. In a street master problem, the information is incorrect in the total vote. That's a different problem than what we're talking about. And I don't know how you prevent total or human error problems. What we do is we always repeat what the precinct is to the voter at the counter and say, here's your precinct and your legislative district, or party, and we believe at that point it is partly the voter's responsibility to know which one to help that. Those are usually caught. The ones that aren't caught are the ones that you mail out. And rarely, if ever, have we gotten a call from a voter that says, oh, we've received the wrong ballot. If you do, you just simply send them off a correct ballot. The only way you know that happens is on election night, and it depends upon how you have your scanners set up to scan and how you program your ballots, whether you'll catch that on election night. And on election night, when you're scanning absentees and you're saying, okay, if you programmed it rather than by style, which is what most counties do, we do it by precinct, we'll get precinct Keystone ballots, and we'll be running them through, and the scanner will kick out a ballot because it's not a Keystone. That's the only way, but when you do it by style, you're not going to...
No, it's just the same thing.
Is it?
Because each precinct then is linked to a particular legislative district. And so the scanner knows which precinct it's scanning and also knows which legislative district should be there. Just like with yours, it kicks it out.
Okay.
If it's a wrong legislative district. And one thing for the public they should be aware is when that gets kicked out, that's not an invalid ballot. Typically it's like a legislative district issue, and so if that's the case and they were given a wrong legislative district ballot, all their other votes count.
Yes.
Not the legislative district, but the ballot is valid.
Yes, because they've actually voted it.
So that would be the invalid.
The invalid one, when we would get an invalid ID?
Yes, and,
Yes.
and the error message on the machines that kicks out with that is it's invalid ballot stamp. Would that be correct?
No, invalid style, I think is what, yes, invalid style is what it'll say, and that's when we know that it was the wrong ballot.
Okay.
You're not talking large numbers here at all. At least not in our county, and I don't think in most counties.
When I was auditor here, there were always a few. And
Always a few.
I would say out of 15 to 18,000 absentee ballots, less than 10.
Yes, I would agree with that.
But it was never zero.
I would agree with that also.
And I was on a resolution table this election, and I think there were 13 at my table at the time I
Oh,
was
were there?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's a totally different issue than when you're talking if you're a voter and you walk in and the total vote has you in the wrong precinct. That is an error in Street Master. And I think the discussion was where that information was converted from Minnehaha County's records into the total vote system and how much proofing was done, and then I believe you reloaded the information and there was still some errors at that point in time. We had a different, in Pennington, we had a different type of, if you will, Street Master table setup, and our IT people worked very closely with the total vote, and ours was not seamless by any means, but we directed staff, and we basically have one person that worked on that until we got our Street Master corrected. And that, how you find out that happens is Mr. and Mrs. John Doe come in and they're registered at the same address. They're married and or with, if it's a parent and a child, and they walk in together to vote and they're given two different ballots, and it's like, wow, why did this happen? That's how you develop a lot of those. And if they say something on election day, you can vote them. There's a process that you can vote them to get them in the right precinct, or give them a provisional ballot if they're in the right precinct, which then you can count later. If one of them's in the wrong precinct, then you can't count the provisional ballot in a non, what do they call that when you're, what do you vote? When you vote centers, when you're just one precinct. So it makes a difference. And you're going to have those with any system. But maintaining a Street Master file takes time and constant review. And that, I believe Total Vote also makes some comparison against this Melissa system for addresses. So it has to, what our issue was, is not that our parameters were construed incorrectly, but that it's our streets that we had loaded did not comply with Melissa. That means you put court in exactly right. It means East North Street, which is what we call it, isn't East North Street at all. It's North Street, comma, East. So those are the kinds of things that you, even during conversion, you have to go in and fix. It's a constant fix.
Who maintains the Melissa system?
I don't know
who's
who's.
like the post office or a private system?
I think it's private systems that are licensed by the post office.
Post office. It's not NCO, not the.
NCOA?
It's not the post office, but it's linked through there because we run all of our federal required notices through this Melissa system, so we don't have to run them against the, well, and I think we still run them against the NCOA before we make those notices out, but it's a consistency, input consistency level program. Not that we always like Melissa.
How often do you have a problem between the two systems when you're comparing NCOA and Melissa? With addresses, do you?
You don't.
Okay.
Because I think Melissa must go through that standardization, and what you pick up from NCOA is the change of addresses for people. So the standardization of North Street East has already been done. And you can't load in a street into Total Vote unless you've loaded it in the Street Master first. And to do that, you have to set up the parameters, you have to tell it what ballot style it's going to have. It all starts from the Street Master. Because when you load a street, you always tell Total Vote, this is the ballot this load will get. Okay. So that's when it starts. And there's programs you can run or lists you can run to test that and to proof that. And we're going through that all the time.
Is there a statewide standard for entering in addresses, for instance, for voter registrations?
Yes, that's that
Okay,
Melissa system.
That's Melissa, okay.
Yeah, you put in, you know, the more is less type thing, you put in the portion of it, it brings up the suggested streets
Okay.
and then once you pick the street, it populates that up into that. And so really the only thing you've entered is the number and the
Okay.
first few letters, it populates the rest. And with that population then comes all the voter ID information.
Okay.
So that's why the street master is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the conversion that Minnehaha was having more of the issues with.
So once you've received you've sent the ballot out and people start mailing them back in, what's the process then to set aside those ballots to make sure that they're secure and that people have voted? Do you do anything with them right away when they come in, or are they just put into a ballot box until they?
When they come in, they all get date stamped the day that they were received, and then everything needs to be checked. For you to be able to later on election day count that vote, each voter has to sign the back with the oath on the envelope that they receive. Every county has the same envelope with the same on it. So we have to make sure it's signed, and then now with total vote by the there's a barcode on it that gets scanned, and then that you put in that you have received it, because then it puts in that receive date, and then everything gets filed away in the back in our vault and gets locked up on a nightly basis, so it's not touched after that. It is touched just by keeping it in alphabetical order within that precinct.
But the
We
ballot
count-
itself isn't looked at, it's
Nope.
the envelope that's
The
looked at.
envelope is sealed and everything until election day. So it's just kept and maintained in just alphabetical order within that precinct, because we count by the precinct in Minnehaha County. I don't know how you guys count yours.
We don't
in
anymore,
Pennington, So everybody kind of does theirs a little different on that part, but we file it within that precinct, alphabetical order, so we know it's always there. And that way on election day, it'll be verified that they have that ballot in that precinct, and then it is opened by the board and moved through, and then it is counted by our scanners on election day.
Does anybody have any additional on this topic?
One thing that I think is an unresolved question that should be discussed before this committee finishes, and that is counting ballots before the polls close. I had some conversations with Bob Litz again this week, and he is still under the impression that the law does not allow him to count absentees before the polls close on election day. And I think we need to have that clarified.
How does Pennington do it on election day with absentee ballots? Do you start counting before the polls close?
Yes, our goal is to have absentees completely counted by 7 p.m. And by counted, we mean scanned.
Right.
Not released, no numbers released.
We don't, and to protect that, we don't even hit the total button until then, which, if we could, we would have, in Pennington County, we were short 244 ballots. We'd had a pileup. We didn't understand what, since these were new, and I don't even know if we wouldn't have been able to catch it even with a different scanning system. But when we had the pileup, because we didn't have the ballots come through and they go into 3 different bins and there's a backrest. Well, we had our backrest set a little too short, and so they piled up. And then there's instructions on the scanner what to do when you have a pileup. It tells you what ballots have been counted, what ballots to remove that haven't been counted, and it said, do you want to clear from the last batch? I believe was the correct word. And what we understood from ES&S, that batch meant was just from the last time we had lifted the ballot tray. That was an incorrect assumption. So we already had ballots that had been in that batch, according to the scanner, in ballot boxes. If we'd have known that, at that point we would have had to clear and start over. But it wasn't until we hit the count and that we were done that we realized we were 244 short. And it's because we had jams on both scanners, and that created us that because we thought we had done the batching correct, that we hadn't decided was wrong yet. We decided there was absentee ballots that had not been opened, like you missed a box or whatever. So we went down and we took almost the entire crew, and we started looking through absentee ballots. And we found a few that were still in there. And we've developed a new process now because of that. We're going to have an additional team look through every envelope. But that wasn't the problem. And at that point, the only thing we could do was clear the scanners, and we started counting over, and we came out exactly right. So we knew it was when we piled up, and that's when we determined that the batch meant from the last time you hit I think it's a clear. Anyway, there's a specific set of buttons that you do to clear the batch, because the 850s scan a copy of every ballot. And that's why it could clear that last batch. We just didn't understand what the last batch was. So we assumed we'd get done at 11, and that took us 2 hours to run our absentees through, and we ran them through again at 11, and we were done at 1. So, which we'd have followed that exact same process no matter what scanner we had. If you're short that many, there's something wrong. And it's at that point that we were already so far, we were behind, because you have all your big precincts already in by that. By 9 o'clock, we have almost all of our precincts in, but the small outlying ones. So regardless of the scanners, we would have had that issue.
In a few minutes, we're going to be going downstairs to look at the 850 scanners, and we could probably have we have the voting machine supplier, tabulator supplier here, ES&S, and like to discuss a few of these things, because we saw some issues with the way the equipment ran on election night, and we'd just like to ask a few questions about that process. And that was involved with the counting process. I knew that one of the other things that happened here on election day was this room, and the room right behind us was where we did the military ballots and the absentee sorting.
The opening of the ballots by reviewing to see if you have that actual ballot, and then the opening of the envelope and the process of stamping each ballot in to be counted and everything. Yes, that is taken. At this time, it was used in this room and the overflow room.
Is this where you would then put the official stamp on the ballot when it was returned?
As they open it, yes, they are putting that official ballot stamp on it after that is opened. Yes, that is correct.
There's 2 stamps. When the ballot is received back in the office, we put a date stamp on it, just like they do. But
on the envelope.
On the envelope. When you open the ballot and you don't open it if you've determined you're not going to count the ballot. But when the ballot is opened, then the absentee ballot board has its own precinct stamp, which is in state law that you have to stamp the ballot to be able to count it, to make it an official ballot. That's the stamp that the absentee ballot counting board puts on.
And so does anybody have any more questions here? I want to make sure we have a chance to go downstairs and look at the machines before we get into the rest of the meeting.
Well, going back to the total vote system and specifically the street master process, what do you think were the problem, if there were any problems? I mean, if there weren't problems, I understand that, but was it a lack of manpower or the ability to process that much data? Or, I mean, do you have a laundry list of...
The street master in itself is, like Julie said, it's a work in progress. It's always being looked at. It's always being added to. Obviously, the city of Sioux Falls and the outlining part of Sioux Falls and in the county, it's growing. And so that street master changes. It could be changing on a daily basis because a house could be being built. School districts are changing. Boundary lines are changing. It just always depends on what it is. So it is always being looked at. Now, street master for us is a work in progress, as always. The odd even tends to be where we were looking into as an issue. We do know that after it was looked at and street master was run through our voters, We then found another issue, which was a north-south, like east-west issue. It would change a voter who say they were on 100 North Main, and it changed them to 100 South Main. The only way we found that is because somebody, when they came in to vote, we always ask their address and we say it back to them, you know, we have you registered at 100 South Main. And then that's where they corrected and said, no, I'm at 100 North Main. Well, in the city of Sioux Falls, north and south is a huge difference on where you live on a different precinct. So that would then automatically put somebody in a different precinct. So I changed thousands back because we had to have the Secretary of State go through and they had to run a report to try to find the north-south issues. You could see what it was supposed to be because it didn't touch their mailing address. It only touched their residence address. I know that's a work in progress on them finding out where it came from, how it happened. I've done it twice now, and we've caught issues every time. And so I've changed thousands on that. So that is an issue right there that's being looked at.
Do you think a lot of that happened because of the data conversion to the new system? When you
Yeah,
took the
yes.
old system, you took the same data from one old system, you put it into the new system, and you think it's that conversion process
I
which
believe it
kind of
is,
caused
yes.
the hiccups?
I think so. If you were to look at our old system, that person still was at 100 North Main, and now they're at 100 South Main. And the thing is, you could have 5 people in one household, kind of like Julie talked about with tying to the street master. You could have one person in that house change, and the other 4 people are correct. But obviously, unless you have them right there in front of you, unless I go through every single person one by one and look at old voter registrations, that's how I find it, you know. But like I said, I did have the Secretary of State's office contact and have them run a report to find some of those. And we've worked on thousands of voters and changed them back to get them so that they are in the correct precincts.
And this was the first election using total vote?
No.
No.
Using the street master?
No, we had a city school election. Turnout for that one is not as big, unfortunately. And so some of those things weren't caught because some of the people who do vote on a general election. And so it wasn't caught right at that time because we didn't know that north-south issue.
Right.
It came up later on with the bigger elections.
Right.
So
Did I understand you correctly that you think it had to do partly with the way abbreviations were put into the system previously and they weren't standard?
I don't know if that was their issue. We didn't have the conversion issue on our street master, but our table was already computerized, if you will. I'm not a computer person, so I'm not using the correct terms, but ours was already standard to our standard. So when it was converted to Melissa, we already knew that East North Street was no longer East North Street. We already knew Melissa didn't like that. It was North Street East. So ours is completely different. We did not experience that, but that's because we converted a different data than they did. We already had a street master. It took our street master and then told us what was wrong with the street master, not, it didn't develop the street master for us.
I did talk with Brandon Campia from B-Pro. He's the company, the vendor that was hired to build this. And he said the issues that Minnehaha County are having have not occurred in any other counties, that directional thing. And he said that one thing he had mentioned is like a lot of counties dedicated a number of staff within their office to go through and review when it was converted to look and try and find those errors. Union County, a smaller county, had 3 dedicated staff. That's all. I mean, they worked straight on, just trying to make sure that that was an accurate file. He said Lincoln County actually had their GIS person involved to make sure that streets and everything were correct. And so I don't know if there's additional staff that maybe can help go through that.
Bob had hired and brought in somebody to go through the street master, and that happened this summer, and she went through it. Julie had one of her employees come out and kind of go over how their process works and went over it with her, and had that did happen this summer. like Julie said, it's still always a work in progress as it goes too, so.
Well, I know we're looking at one of the meetings that we're gonna have Brandon from Repro here at one of the meetings, and so maybe at that time it'll be a way that we can identify what's happening with your file.
You know, I know they talked about different counties not having the north-south issue, and a lot of those counties probably don't even have north-south like we do. I mean, City of Sioux Falls is grossly, immensely huge compared to everybody else. So we do have the north-south, and I don't know if that is an issue for other counties because they might not have as many polling locations, you know, and that part I could never say for sure. So, but yeah, it would be great to talk with Brandon here.
We'll have a series of questions for that meeting that kind of working on some ideas for it. So we'll continue that one in more detail. Should we adjourn for a few minutes while we go downstairs and get set up for the ES&S portion of the meeting? So I guess we will.
Go straight down there?
Yes. Giving us the full tour of the machines. That worked out very well. So that really helps the group here especially understand what we went through on election night with technology. So thank you for making sure the demonstration was correct. So the next part we're gonna do on our agenda is the general discussion of what happened on the counting process, and we also wanted a general discussion on the location of the tabulating process. As many of you noticed, we were in a very small room, and the small room ended up causing some problems and having to have things being done all through the building. And we as members of the resolution board were kind of pinched a little bit sometimes on space. If we're going to have to need more resolution boards, then where do we put them? How do we do it? So we wanted to have an open discussion about this and the other issues that we had going through the process. And Julie, you've done a lot of this work out in Pennington County and didn't know how well you knew our courthouse and our administration building complex here. So we've included in the packet, which Robert has packets here for everybody to take so that you can follow along with some of the discussion and things that were going on the election night and during that day with the opening of the ballots, et cetera. So it's first and second floor because we asked a question in our previous meeting about possibility of doing more of the process upstairs here in the commission chamber. And so would anybody like to start off this part of our discussion? Robert.
One thing I should probably just mention as you start to look at this with a look towards the future, we do have some space limitations within this building, and those are not getting any easier as we have growing obligations. I would just let the committee know that when you are looking at space possibilities moving into the future, it is the plan at this point to encroach on a little bit of this open area behind us and create offices back there. So as you consider any recommendations or brainstorming or talking about potentially doing more or different things with that location back there, just be aware that that space back there could be dramatically different by the next time we undertake an election. Much smaller space. In that vein, that's the only meeting room that out in the building that's open. I know there's another room right here to the side. Have you used that building before? Is that going to be changed? I'm sorry?
The training room?
Yes, we have a training room right next door here. That's fairly new. That's been up and running a year and a half. I think we will have to use that most likely because again, that area is not going to be there. So we have a training room over there with movable tables, and it's one of the fewer open areas that we still have available. There's a first floor, what used to be considered, was referred to as a multi-purpose room. It was sort of a general meeting room and some items down there. There's some voting equipment stored in that room at this point. So I would point out those are two somewhat open areas, but they are utilized.
Robert, could you put the second floor on the overhead so everybody can see what we're talking about with these rooms and point it out? And since we'll be discussing both floors, maybe it'd be better to start out with, we'll talk about the first part of what we did on Election Day, and the auditor's office I thought they had this set up very nicely on Election Day. For having been through some of these processes before, I thought it was very well laid out. And the reason this question came up was because and if you could point to the ante room right behind us, Robert, on here,
Sure.
So people can see.
This is the room we're in right now. This is the room out behind us that we're talking about, that by the next time we have an election, most likely, that will probably be a straight corridor coming down.
As a sidelight to the discussion we just had downstairs,
Yeah.
when Robert used his pen to point out the room on the page, did everybody notice how quickly it put a mark on there, and how the DS 850 downstairs would have kicked that ballot out? I just thought I'd point that out.
We need a green pen. And then the new training room that I was just mentioning that we've created is right here. So that's immediately adjacent over there. Yes.
Question?
Go ahead.
Do you have commission meeting on Tuesday?
Yes, we do. 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning.
Not election.
No.
Not election day? Okay. And where do you count absentees? And how many rooms do you use to do that?
The absentee ballots, actually, Darlene or Heather, could you come up and explain that part of the process?
And what time are you done by?
This is Darlene.
Darlene Johnson from the auditor's office. They're actually opened up here, and back here where the tables are. We have teams of people that open them, stamp them, get them all in order. After that, they go back down to our office where they're locked up, and then we were done, I think, about 2 or 2:30 on election day, actually opening them, I believe.
So these rooms were open by then?
Right.
This was a small election, though. I mean, there were only 10,000 absentees, and there've been as many as 18,000.
Yeah, so then you go
So,
to 2 rooms at least.
Then it was also in there, but the tables were a lot tighter, and we were done closer to 6 or 7, or actually even after the polls closed, sometimes we're still
We're done?
working up here.
Actually, the ballots were kept up here, so if anybody dropped off a ballot, because they could drop off a ballot up until, an absentee ballot, up until 7 p.m. So they were kept up here. There was a group that were kept here so that they could open those as those came in, and then they would be put in with the correct precinct.
Is there a, we also use our emergency communications center. That's not in this building, Sue?
It's nowhere near. No.
Do you have to put the machines in the courthouse?
For ballot security, the more spread out it is, the worse it is.
I was just, wondering how hard it would be to move them to another.
You don't,
You don't wanna move
you don't move them.
machines. Years ago, we used the second floor of the extension building across the street before we had this big room.
Open area.
And then you had the hassle of transporting ballots.
And the security.
Yeah,
And then they get moist and well, I just want you to know that well, I'll refrain from my normal comment only because Sue's the only one that knows me. Okay, maybe I won't. Commissioners that are so concerned with how the election went off, they're not providing the adequate space for the auditor, even clear back into Sioux, to run the elections that they're complaining about. And I don't know which commissioner it was that landed so hard on Bob, but that's one of the biggest issues, is that they need better space and they need more space to keep those ballots secure in a environmentally safe and controlled temperature-wise area. And thank God my commissioners weren't like that. And it's not very often I actually comment and compliment on my commissioners. But
He was making a political statement more than anything.
no, but he does. The commissioners do not believe that it is important enough to do that. And
Sir?
really what you need to do is free that space back there and get your scanners back there and store them where you're going to count. You don't want to be moving these scanners around because they are pieces of delicate, I don't know if they're computer equipment, but they're sensitive pieces of equipment that you get them where you want them. They should be access to individual different electrical breaker type things, so if you blow one, you don't blow both of them. They ballots need to come in a secured manner. You need to be able to have some place to drop off the supplies, to sort out your voted, your unvoted ballots, and you need to be able to secure your ballots from the moment the auditor gets them through the moment that they're done opening them and they're done counting them, which means, you know, if you're going to use the time to be able to count absentees prior to the polls closing, not release the figures, you can do that under statute. If you have to share a room, you still need enough room to do that so that you're done by the time you want to start counting ballots. But if they're going to take that room up with offices, I don't know where there's enough room. With the 650s, you were lucky. With the 650s, you needed to keep it about 60 degrees in there. They counted much better. The drier they were and the colder it was. The 850s are not nearly as sensitive, but we still start bringing the temperature down and bringing the ballots in so that they're kind of a little bit more dried out, and they do run better.
The humidity and the temp was really an issue, because I do know that in that room downstairs that we've been doing this in, it gets extremely warm and humid. Because there's a lot of people jammed into a small room that doesn't have much ventilation.
And you do need to have enough resolution people in there to do their job, which is to watch the scanning and to recreate what ballots by law that you're supposed to kick out. Now I know that I believe Bob's screen was set to kick out more than he was supposed to be kicking out per state law, which would have cut it down quite a bit. And we've resolved the ballot stamp issue, which is going to help us, and we're going to get back to the truly unmarked ballot, which I have some copies of some ballots that were kicked out and what the scanner actually read on them. And they're all ballot stamp problems, and it's the green highlighter that didn't count, which now I understand why. And if we can have a watermark, or we're going to plan our ballot so we have room, avid room for that. But that it's a big issue where you count and that complete flow of ballots, you just can't be moving them all over.
Darlene or Heather, what does it cost to get new stamps? I mean, if you were to go out and buy new stamps for the next election, so we never have that issue again.
We actually did just buy new stamps. I think it was around $2,000,
Okay.
between $1,500 and $2,000.
Yeah.
So we did purchase all new stamps, red stamps.
Yeah, we didn't know it was green.
They're all pre-inked red stamps.
They're self-inking.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, we just ordered them. They're only about this big now. because we don't figure anybody has to read them.
Okay.
The only time you look at them is when you have a recount and they kick them out a ballot if it's not stamped. But regardless how big it is, if you look at some of the issues that we had, if it violates any of those lines and the check marks, it kicks it out. And I wouldn't bet that it's not going to kick out green. So we just need to plan that we have to leave room for it. And if it creates a bigger ballot, 850s will count them.
So if we have, one of our recommendations we could probably come up with is possibly doing a design with a specific box that has a real light printing that says ballot stamp here or something, so that there is no mistake from the point of view. Because I was actually, being on the resolution board, was involved with some of the marking over the codes down in the lower corner.
Well, you can only hope with your poll workers that that makes a difference. I specifically told mine, don't violate any of these lines, and we've had 2 huge precincts.
As I remember, and the auditor's office could probably clarify this, we had one precinct that was consistent in that issue, so I remember having to fix a few things like that. So that's something that we're going to have to help the county consider, is where we're going to be doing the process, and if we could work, let the commissioners know that we're concerned about having enough space, and now that we know about these other issues that are involved with the humidity and the temperature in that room, and because it's really tight down there when we're working.
Well, and I think if the Secretary of State can have a visit with Bob and make sure he's comfortable that he can start counting before 7 and have them all done, as well as not to sort for the over and under votes that he may not have gotten clear direction before.
How many resolution boards did you have?
I always have 1 per scanner.
Okay.
Until we were having the issue of recreating what we thought was going to be a very huge precinct with the ballot stamp, and then I called in 10 more.
In the previous resolution board that I've been involved with, it seemed to me we also had 1 resolution board per machine. Wasn't that the way it was done? And so looking at the situation, it looked like these machines were going to be running so much faster, we didn't have to have as many resolution boards as we did. But what happened, we ended up with the 600 and broke down a little piece in here on how long it took to do all of those resolutions. And, it's 5 minutes a piece to do it. And in your situation in Pennington County, when it was finally done, how many resolution boards did you have, do you think?
At least 12.
12. So we finished out with between 3 and 4 through the night, trying to get caught up.
Mm-hmm. It made all the difference. And we didn't have to recreate as many as Bob was recreating, but we had changed our scanner and started over.
How many rejects do you think you had that night?
We had right around the same. It was either 254, 244, 224. That and the amount we were off in the absentees were about the same number. And I thought he had 400 or 600. 600, yeah.
527, excluding the military ones that were handled during the day, are the numbers you folks gave me. 576 total, but 49 of them. Bruce, you were one of the team that dealt with them during the day. So
right.
After 7 p.m., 527.
But we have call-in people, and that's exactly what we have them on staff for, and call them in, and they came in, and what you do is you want to get up before the people get tired, which I can't imagine working. You're tired enough the next day. I can't imagine working all up until the next day. And we just called them in, and probably the only law we didn't follow is we didn't notify the parties of who they were, but the parties also knew we were having problems. So, and we have a good working relationship with both parties, and most auditors do. And so we just started calling them in.
I know Bob was looking for people, because we were trying to come up with suggestions for names and at one point, so. This was the second floor in the discussion of the 3 rooms. On the page just prior, we have the first floor. And Robert, if you could, I'm going to just kind of go through this quickly on what we did in each room and area. And so it has a parking lot entrance door. And the parking lot entrance door is where the cars pull up, and Bob would have Boy Scouts and other volunteers bringing the ballots into the building from the cars as they arrive. And that moves pretty smoothly into that rounded area, which is kind of like a center court area where the ballot boxes are checked in. And from the ballot boxes and all the supplies being checked in, then they get moved down the hall to the room where all the ballot boxes are then opened. And that would be
Point where we were just now in that hot room
that
you count in? That one?
up just a little bit higher, Robert. That is the room where the ballots are. We opened up the doors into that room, and that's where the ballots are opened and put through the
And you used to have 3 of them in there, Sue?
4.
At
one point, we had 5.
Let me correct that.
You should be ashamed of yourself, Ken, and your commissioners.
Yeah, we were there.
Yes, that's the room where we were at.
And then we were,
Right in there. That's where the ballots come
yeah.
in.
This mark on the line is the door that we opened down.
So you use those 2 rooms?
The bigger room is used for opening the ballot boxes and then sorting them out, verifying the precinct piles on a set of banquet tables that are put in
And
there.
then you only use the front half of that next room?
That,
That's where we just were. That was the hot room. Yes.
The front half?
yes.
IT is in one of those little rooms.
Could you point out, I was going to point out when we were down there about the IT room. It's that small room.
IT is sitting right in here.
That's where that's the other room.
Booths are stored.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Heather.
This little one.
So they're
That's where
sitting in there
they-
with their computer and they're doing the uploads to Peer in that room.
And when you bring your supplies in, you put your booths in that room right away, Heather?
No.
No, you just stack everything in the hall, don't you?
Booths don't
Exactly.
come back until later. We have a group that goes and gets booths the next couple days afterwards.
Oh, so the only thing
Booths
you're,
don't come back. What comes back is ballot boxes. They're black suitcase bags with all their supplies in it.
black evening
signs.
bags?
Yep, and that's what comes back.
And everything's stacked in the hall except for the ballot boxes?
No.
Nothing
The ballot
is.
boxes go down into the room that was right next to where we were counting.
The bigger room?
Yes.
But they don't go in there that night.
Is that where they're opened?
Yes, they're opened in that room. Yes, yes.
Okay.
They're opened in that room, and that's where they'll pull the voted and the not voted out. And then the other stuff stays in the hallway, and then we'll take care of that stuff later. So yes, they go down to that room and then are opened right there, and then split, and then they jog them and everything like that with the.
Where's your
precincts.
joggers?
In the bigger room.
They're
In the bigger room?
Yeah, they're in the bigger room right next to where they're opening.
They're
the ballots.
usually along
Right
the
along
wall
the
in
wall.
In the bigger room?
Yes.
Okay.
They're right about, there's a line right up here.
Mm-hmm.
It is right there.
Okay.
Where we usually have our joggers.
And then where are the ballots located between the time you jog them and they go to your,
They go right into that big room, and they are just filed along the wall. They're
on a
labeled.
table? So you've got you've got 2 scanners, you've got the ballot staging table, and both your resolution boards in that little room?
The 2 resolution boards, the primary ones are sitting in the room with the machines.
Yeah, they have
And
to
then
be.
the additional ones are within eyesight of the door, so we're watching the machines as they're running. So we're in the bigger room. At this past time, I was in that bigger room with another resolution board between that small hallway door and the door into the small room where the machines were at.
Well, I'd do what I could to flip those two rooms. It's not going to help the issues that were there on the other night, but if you could wall that, secure that hall off, I don't know what's in those two other back offices just for election night, and do your ballot opening and stuff in the hall.
Register deeds and...
And across the hall.
I'm trying to follow you.
Yeah. Secure off that so you can actually, yeah, right there. Secure that hallway off so you can flip your scanning room into the bigger room, which will then allow you to have your two resolution teams at tables in there, and you can do your ballot opening in the hallway. It is secured through the time that you get, but after that night, all you have in those ballot boxes are unvoted ballots. So you can let your register deeds fumble through them if they want to.
Register deeds is across the hall, so they're...
Well, you're securing that hallway until you get those out of there. And then switch those rooms. And again, that will give you more room to scan, which you need more room to scan on that night if you don't use this room.
Not at night. That was just during the day.
You don't move your scanners during the day.
No,
Yeah.
everything is...
Yeah. You know, until you get more space. That would give you more space to scan and give you more leeway. It just gives you the breathing room that you need. How many people per scanning team? Heather?
Heather?
How many, do you have 2 or 3 people per scanner to scan? 2?
And then we had a runner for each one. So you had 2 at the scanner, and then you had a runner. So
For each scanner to the absentee, to the resolution team?
Yep.
Yeah. That would help with that. And then, and I think if you have the Secretary of State verify with that and with the ballot stamp issue, it should alleviate a lot of the backlog for Bob. And have call people, which we will now start notifying the parties that we're going to have a 25, 26 person resolution team on call, so that we've notified them, and if they want to have somebody come in there and...
So what you're suggesting, Julie, just a second, Joel.
Just to give them a little wall it
I
off.
think I think you wall it off right here.
Yes, then you
Because
can have
this has
access.
to be open to the public, but if you walled it off from here to here, I think is what you're suggesting.
Mhm.
We need that open because this is the vault where everything goes into.
Yeah.
Fresh eyes are great. All the years I was here, I never thought of securing that hallway. One time we did scan in the hallway. But
Or you could move your scanners up here if you made sure they weren't touched, and you could scan up here.
you still want access to the scanning room for the public to observe it. But right beyond that, there's no reason
What
the
you could
public
do,
needs to go back there.
I mean, you guys aren't looking at building a new building. We put cameras in. We don't have public in our scanning room anymore. We have cameras, and the cameras feed everything to the commissioner's room, and you want anything, you sit in our commissioner's room now. And it worked great. The one thing I will tell you, if you're going to do that, have a hostess. And the reason I call it a hostess is because we didn't know there was anybody down there.
I think it should be a host.
Well, ours was a hostess. But yes, it could be a hostess.
Generic person.
Yes, a generic person, because you need that, because what they're wanting to watch, and that's where we put them, for also to receive all of our results. And by next election, we're going to have the total vote, whatever that system is on election night reporting, scrolling through on one of our TV screens, as well as the public view of the count. That gets them all out of there. They don't bother you. They're always asking questions, but if you've got this hostess, then they can run the reports back and forth and the totals back and forth and answer them with any questions, make sure everything's running right. And have it without sound. We were very specific that we didn't want sound. And you need somebody down there, especially with the new ones, to explain, or with the new scanners, to explain to the people, if you're going to camera it, which was the cheapest way for us to provide space for the public on election night. And the easiest access in the new building.
I have a
to
question.
explain how the scanners work.
We have a city television station on our cable TV, and it's called CityLink. And would you, in Pennington County, provide that type of a link up to the, so that it could be checked up on, or they could pop into? Do you open that link up so that the TV stations could be part of it?
No, we haven't.
So that, because a lot of times we get the cameras in there, and as much as we want everything to be public, sometimes, even a small camera can be in the way. So if it's mounted in the ceiling or some way to view everything, is that?
Yeah, we've not had that request from the
media?
From the media to do that. They usually come in much earlier. And, by the time on election night, we knew we weren't going to be done by 10. They hadn't. The only people that called me was the newspaper. Nobody else called and said, what are your issues? Why aren't we done by 10? Da 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 da. And we weren't putting any numbers in. We didn't hit the 10 o'clock news either. And our city controls when everything is run on that city station, and if you can find the county commission meetings, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning. So I don't know if that flow would be available, but if they ask for it, I'll let them ask the city. We do have filming capability in there because we also film it.
All right. We have had a series of other questions in this whole setup, and I did have a couple questions for somebody from ES&S that I would like to ask, and I'm sure we'd like to kind of clarify some of the things that we just went through downstairs. If one of you could talk about, we had a discussion in our December meeting about the weight of the paper and the issues with the printing process, that there was some discussions about bleed through on if somebody held pen down too long. One of the things we noticed in the resolution board, that when we were told we could use the felt tip marker so we could quickly, more quickly correct the ballots and get them sent through, we found out you can't leave them on the paper too long because they'll bleed through on the backside. And just wanted to talk about how that process could work and what difference paper weight means. And then if you could come up to the podium and identify yourself again, Mike.
Again, Mike Overston with Election Systems.
Thank you, Mike.
The paper that we use is one specified by our engineer and has gone through the certification process. It's an 80-pound paper, and as far as the other specs, there's specs as to whiteness and brightness. There's the grain of the paper. I'm no printing expert, but there's a number of criteria that they use in selecting the proper paper to be printed on. So it's more than just the weight of the paper. It's the way that the grain is on the paper. It's the finish of the paper. And there can be a wide assortment of markers that will distribute ink on the paper at different rates. So we usually go through and test the different markers, and we come up with recommendations on markers that we think work best with our system. As far as readability, the system's able to read the different markers, but as far as usability of the markers, well, there's definitely ones that we prefer over others.
Has ES&S changed the paper weight of the ballot stock?
No, that's been the same. It's that same 80-pound paper that we've used for over 20 years.
Previously, the local printer had been printing the ballots for Minnehaha County, and we understand this past election, ES&S supplied the ballot stock?
We supplied the ballots, and the printing firm that we use prints all the ballots for the state of South Dakota, all but 2 counties in the state of North Dakota, and all but 3 counties in the state of Minnesota. So they've got a wealth of experience. Their quality has always been very high. We have very few problems with them.
There was excuse me if I could, there was an issue at one point about lint building up in the machines, and they had to stop and blow them out on occasion. Used to be a lot worse on the, as I remembered, on the older machines, but I remember they were trying to figure out why things weren't quite grabbing properly, and there was a discussion about lint buildup. Just wondered if you'd had much issue with lint buildup.
I haven't heard much about it. I do know that the company that we used to print the ballots, they had gotten some new presses, big presses that use rolls of paper rather than cut stock.
Okay.
And very efficient operation, and the quality is such that we picked up a number of new users using that process. So.
I've noticed in the work that I do that sometimes when paper comes off of a roll stock, you end up with, depending on how sharp the cutting mechanism is, the cutter on it, you end up with a kind of a bird edge, and I was wondering if that might have any effect then on that process when it comes from roll stock.
We didn't see that issue in Pennington, any difference. We've had Synergy or Sea Change print our ballots for a number of years.
Would the fact that on the absentee ballots we had so many folds in some of these, I mean, people really folded them multiple times, more than they probably should have, but does that create a lint problem when you have...
I'm not aware of a lint problem with folds. The bigger problem with folds, if they don't fold across where the score marks are. Most ballots are scored to where you put the folds because we don't want folds going through oval positions. So when people fold and refold their ballot, if they're not careful, sometimes they can get a fold across a voting position, and that can cause problems. So we don't like to see folds going across an oval position, and instead, if the ballots are scored, when they're folded out and sent out, they're folded where those score marks are. And so we encourage that when people send their ballots back in, that they use those same scores to refold their ballots and send it in.
Could I ask Heather or Darlene, I don't remember seeing fold marks or anything, score marks.
That's the first I've ever heard of score marks on there. I think they ordered all their ballots flat.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't have that.
That after you've been using ballots for so many years, I think a lot of people, my counties that I've worked with, sort of forget sometimes that they can order and score or fold it. So that's something that we can talk about in the next election.
This is why we have you here, because we're learning things constantly in this process.
I work with 4 different states, and there's just about 4 different ways of doing things or more I've learned in working with the different states. But on the whole, scoring ballots can help so that you don't get the issue of folds going through oval positions. When we were downstairs working with the machines, I wanted to ask you about the difference between short ballots and long ballots, because that was an issue in the recent city election on the old machines and how they had problems getting those ballots to sit properly on the old DS650 versus using these machines and using a longer ballot format. And how long a ballot can you
use?
The 850 can take 11, 14, 17, and 19-inch long ballots. There's a huge difference between the way that a 650 would take a longer ballot with folds and the 850. The 850, if I were to open up the read path, you'd see a series of rollers that help support and guide, and this has made a tremendous difference when feeding through ballots that have been folded, because we refer to it as true grip technology. So it's gripping the ballot from the time that it goes past the read heads through the entire path until it's outstacked into the different bins. The previous systems did not have that ability. As a result, it was much tougher feeding ballots through that had been folded through a 650 or the earlier generation. Our first generation, just as a point of reference, only had one ballot length that you could read, and that was 14-inch period. So with the newer technologies, we've been able to go to longer ballots. The other big difference is the capacity, the memory capacity of these systems. We can put over 9,999 precincts on the system, whereas before we were limited in many areas as to the number of precincts we could put on. So the memory has been tremendously enhanced in the new systems, and that's due to the newer technology that we use.
How big of hard drives are you putting in these machines for storage? We talked about it having an encrypted copy of the file, so when that machine rebooted, making sure that we didn't lose the data that was already in there. And so I was wondering how large that actual hard drive was versus the RAM.
Do you happen to know? I'm not sure the hard drive size. We found it more than adequate to work some of the larger jurisdictions. For example, Miami-Dade uses 850s, I believe, to process their absentee ballots. So we're finding with more and more jurisdictions going to early voting, vote centers, and all-mail ballot elections that we need that kind of memory capacity. Also, in other states, they have a larger requirement for different language ballots. For example, in New York, I believe they have at least 6 or 7 languages they have to provide for. I know in Florida they have 3 languages. So as a result of needing more different ballot styles, or if you have jurisdictions that have a high number of precinct counts, we found that we needed that extra capacity in our system, and now the 850 provides all that.
Julie, did you have a question?
Yeah, you didn't see more on election night. Was the folded ballots, though they do count a little more difficultly, was that part of your recreation problem? No, okay.
I just remember there was a couple feed problems, and they
with
figured
folded
that
ballots.
out. And
Yeah, and that had to do with the new 850s, how they have you put the fold up now after you've been folded and stuff like that. That was something that's a new thing to all of us, being we have never used 850s before. And so it was just kind of reminding yourself how to have that fold so it kind of angled up so it would catch it and stuff like that. And that's just us trying to remember that. But I mean, I think anybody who folds ballots is always going to have an issue of them going through folded no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
When the ballots go through the machine and get outstacked in the counters, what Heather's referring to is on that last fold, is the paper going up like this, or is the paper going down? We prefer going down, that way it can't get caught on the way into that outstack bin. So on that last fold, we recommend that when those ballots come in, you back fold the ballot, so you fold them opposite the way they came in, and then try to flatten the ballot as much as possible. I know some jurisdictions, they put their ballots in stacks and then weigh down the stacks to try to flatten them up. They'll also run them through their joggers, so that creates some airspace between the ballots. And we find that that helps in processing the ballots.
Who folds your ballots, Heather? Who folds them? You do?
We do, as we fill out every
Manual or by machine?
manual.
What,
We have a folding machine.
what does the, we were having a discussion about the optimal temperature and humidity for the room, so that the paper lays properly, and we've always had in those two rooms that we're working in downstairs, it's been warm and humid.
That can cause issue running ballots through any machines, and paper is kind of like a sponge in a way. It can absorb that moisture. We've seen some where it's actually enlarged the paper, and it's had a harder time going through a read path because of the amount of swelling that's taken place in the paper. So in your processing facility, like Julie mentioned, having a cooler room and a dry room is crucial in running those ballots.
Dryer sheets. You put dryer sheets in your ballot boxes?
Counting, we turn
Dryer
that room
sheets?
down. But we have the room where we count everything, we turn it down to 60 degrees in the morning as soon as we get here. So 5 o'clock in the morning, it's turned down to 60, and I think we all can contest how cold it was in that room. But we turn it down to get that humidity out and everything like that. Where ballots are stored, they're stored in the vault, and our vault is always turned down and cool in there too. You walk in there and it's cold. So we keep stored in a cool room too. So I think that's something.
It was just hot in there today.
Just today, yes, we didn't turn it down today. Yes.
Did you
But
say,
by the end of the evening, it gets a little bit stuffier.
Oh, I can
You
see
know.
why.
sorry, did you say you have your own printing facility, or do you job these ballot printing out
We
to
have
subcontractors?
both. We do have our own printing facilities, and then there are partner printers that we use in addition that have to go through training and use our specs.
Which is Sea Change.
They're a partner printer.
That's who prints the
And
ballots in
it's
South
comprised
Dakota.
of people that used to be, they're former employees of ES&S that had gone to another company that we have now partnered with. And like I say, they do a fantastic job, and they print ballots for 3+ states for us.
Go ahead.
One comment and one question. The comment is Minnehaha County has always used ES&S ballot stock. It was printed locally, but
Okay.
the ballot stock came from ES&S, so there's no change with the change to using Sea Change. Is that what it's
Change,
called
yeah.
for printing?
Okay.
Just to clarify, Julie, did you use pencils or markers?
We use the blue Bic pens.
Pens. Okay, and here
Cheapest
The
Bic.
stick pens, the
The
clear stick
blue
pens?
white ones with the blue writing, they are the best markers.
And you found that they bled through?
No,
They didn't bleed through. Now
No.
here they use those black markers
That were ES&S labeled?
that are more likely to, you put down a magic marker on a pencil or on a paper and it bleeds through.
I wouldn't have,
So I wonder about that.
Changing
You
pens.
said downstairs that the 850 reads virtually anything.
Yeah.
And obviously absentees aren't gonna come in marked with that marker. They would be a pen or pencil. I think that's what the state administrative rule instructions say.
If it's not on the instruction sheet, it's on the ballot, it says here use only a pen on the ballot instructions, but, the separate instructions that we send with an absentee ballot, I believe we tell them, okay, we might not exactly word it that way, Sue. We tell them to use a blue pen.
Okay. Yeah, I thought on the ballot it said use only a pen or pencil, but that might be one
We may have taken
issue.
the word pencil off.
That
of our-
might be an issue for them to discuss is,
We
do you
prefer
use-
a pen to a pencil, and there's a couple reasons why. The more contrast you have makes it easier for the system to pick up a darker mark. And with a pencil, depending upon the hardness of the pencil, you can have a wide variation as to the darkness of the mark. You can have a very light mark.
Kia?
And the other issue
This
you can get
ballot
with a
is from
pencil is that
November,
the
and it
graphite
just says
can
pen.
rub off the ballot and dirty up the machine faster.
And you guys would send
Okay.
those instructions. The instructions on a ballot only say pen, and that's a nice thing when you use Sea Change.
As
the
appropriate for your
information comes
system.
from from total vote into C change automatically, so you don't have to load everything. You only have to prove that everything is in the right spot.
12, 18, 16.
The administrative rule says use only a pencil or pen, but then notes use pencil or pen as appropriate for your system. It may be that you got a recommendation from the state to use pen, but the administrative rule says pencil or pen.
And that's
Yeah.
what the statute says too, 12, 18, 16. You may use pencil or pen to mark the voter's ballot.
Oh, okay.
And that was last amended in 2002.
You might want to note that because these, and we don't load the instructions, all that comes through from total vote. Just says pen, which is what we want it to say. You know, we sent you those changes to the instructions anyway.
Yeah.
So you probably,
Does anybody have any more questions for Mike or EAS&S, or any other comments about our?
I'll sit back down, but if you have anything else, I'll be gladly to come up and address anything I can.
Thank you, Mike. We're going to move on to the next area, and just we've asked the county to put in a website covering our activities so that people at home could follow, or if they have any questions. And we'd like to have Robert go through the website with us.
Absolutely. Let me just pull it up here. I'll pull it up here in just a moment. All right, and we were somewhat fortunate in that we have a separate, similar committee that's looking at criminal justice issues for the county right now, and we had worked with IT to build a template where we could list meeting agendas, reports that were being considered, meeting minutes, and so we really built a template off of what we already have, and this is a link to the draft election review committee website that I sent to all of you last week. Found out yesterday mid-afternoon that was an internal only link, and so I followed up with a link that I hope you've had a chance to look at either later yesterday afternoon, this morning, and it's fairly basic. It just uses our main heading. This line is consistent really to all of this gray line is consistent to all county pages, and then down the left column here we have a spot for agendas, minutes, committee members, press releases, and then video recordings of the meetings, and that's something that's going to be provided by our IT. Really all of this is supported by our IT department. We just have those 5 categories as a starting point. We can add more if you like, if you would like to see them, but you click on that, and it's going to have the agenda for last meeting, and then obviously today we'll get this posted on for the agenda for this meeting. We've got meeting minutes. Now that you've approved the meeting minutes from last week ago, those will go on there. Report, committee members. I have all of the contact information for each of the members, and I've already heard some feedback or changes that people would like to see on that. We can change that to whatever you'd like, however you'd like to be contacted. Press releases, and then just to show you where the similar website or page that we have on our overall county website is showing up now. They look similar, but this is the main front page for our county website that's live at this moment. And you scroll down and you see down here there's a Criminal Justice Advisory Committee page. You open up and it's a similar looking web page, and we would do something very similar with this Election Review Committee website. We can put it right there. This criminal justice page, we have that both on the sheriff's page and the commission office page. I would imagine we could put this on the main page and then link to it off of the commission page or off of the auditor page or both. We really have quite a bit of flexibility on that. So that is a brief review of what we've got so far. Again, I didn't put that live until all of you had a chance to look at it and ask for any corrections, changes, different look as far as what we're able to do with working with our IT. So I would turn it over to you for any questions or suggestions.
A suggestion I might have would be on the main page on the left-hand side, if we could maybe add a link to the state election laws and administrative rules and/or Secretary of State's website, because someone looking at that might want to just preview and take a look at what the state law would read.
I think that would be easy to do. Absolutely.
Yeah, it should be.
And Bruce had a comment about just changing email addresses and different phone numbers, addresses. If anything else, any of the rest of you saw any contact information that you'd like to change? I think Kia, you mentioned one to me.
Yeah, I need to change my phone number on there too.
Phone number and title. Didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh, we got the title too.
Is that your home address on there? Do you want your home address?
No,
That-
he's changing that.
He's
already.
changing
Yeah.
that. Okay, I saw that. I thought, that's not right.
That was before I was.
The other question that I asked Robert about was if we wanted to have, right now we've got the link out there and I wanted it to be probably a little more prominent to say our generic committee email address on there instead of our individual email addresses. That way, if somebody from the public wants to send us something, we all get exactly the same thing, and then we can all respond as appropriately, versus going to individuals and maybe getting some misunderstandings, or it was just a thought.
I think I'm not sure if I understood. I would like to see our individual emails stay out there on the committee list, but I think it's a good idea to prominently highlight the committee email so that comments would go to that. On the main page, I think it says if you have any comments, contact a committee member. Well, I think it would be nice if at that point it said email this.
Or you as the chair.
Doesn't it say there about contact a committee member? At some point it does. Maybe not on that first tab.
It's too small for me to read
We certainly could put.
What are the subjects on the side, the links up above in?
Agendas, minutes, committee members, press releases, and video recordings.
Maybe have one that says contact. Just the word contact.
Yeah, that would be good.
Perfect, and we could even
I was
bold
thinking
that,
there
read
was-
it, some, yeah.
I think it's on the committee members page, if I remember
That
right.
it says contact a committee member. Yeah, I think a contact.
I think there was something
along.
along,
Something on the main.
Down
main
at the
page.
bottom, does it say that? Someplace I saw that.
yeah, I did too.
I can't think where it is now, but yeah, if you put it on the main screen, I think that covers it.
We can very easily.
One thing that would be
put
nice
Contact.
too is when you're on one of those pages, you can't get back, you can't click a link to get to another page, unless I'm missing something.
Is the style sheet set up so that
Go
the
to your
agenda, minutes, et cetera, is on each page?
Go to your press releases tab, or link.
Yes.
See, there's no way there to go to see what the other links are, or to get to them. You have to hit the back arrow.
What about on the bottom though? I think there
Does it
is.
say that?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
on the
okay, I'm
bottom,
just
yeah.
blind.
When they set up the
Okay.
page, Robert,
Thank you.
Could they set up the cascading style sheet to go with the links over on the left-hand side each time?
It was there, I just couldn't see it.
You know, like the main page? I'll go into more detail on that as.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up with you on that, because and we are working off something of a template.
Exactly.
For the IT department. And
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments about the? We've got the next part of the meeting is for any general public comment, and I know you've had a few comments as being a member. If you'd like to come up and identify yourself and become part of our process, we'd really appreciate it. If you could state your name and.
Yeah, my name's Greg Ellis, and I was election superintendent for precincts 4, 7, 4, 8 for the last 2 elections. And the one problem that I get involved here, I noticed, is because both the primary and the general election, I sent over 220 people from my polling place to other polling places because they don't know where the heck to vote. That's why I'm kind of working on seeing if we can consolidate polling or voting places even more, so people don't get confused with a city election and a federal election, and they're running all over town, or they go home.
We're going to have another meeting in the future, and it'll be on the list of which day that'll be. That we'd like to have a really open discussion about the voting centers versus precincts and the issues that are involved with both, and so we want to get into that in more detail on that session.
Yeah, because the map I've got there is laid out in square mile grids, and you know, this day and age, really, you know, 1 per square mile is almost adequate, because that's only 6 blocks either way if you're in the center of the grid.
Well,
but I know it's got to be laid out a little bit too. And a couple other things I learned today that you might want to look at too is on the ballots itself, the ovals, it's easier to write vertically instead of horizontally, so maybe that's something to look at, is just turn those 90 degrees.
Is that, I see a shaking head over here. It's in your standard. Is that what we're following?
Well, I know the current software that we use, the ballot layout software, is kind of like a ballot type setting software that we actually lay out the ovals, the columns, everything.
Per what the machine can do?
Right. Right now it's not set up to do vertical ovals, so that'd be a software change that we need to look into.
Okay.
And another thing is I don't know if they print the voter registration books every election, because I'm sure there's changes in it. Sue, do they print new books for?
Absolutely. Yeah, those are unique to every election.
And the one thing I'm asking too is maybe look into if it's possible to maybe change the color of the last names and increase the font a little bit, because after 10 hours people's eyes get real tired looking at them.
That's a question for you.
Because that's a total vote thing, so the Secretary of State could review that.
Yeah, just everything gets blurry, especially if you're looking after same last names that look about the same, N's and M's look pretty close together after 10 hours.
At the last election, you did or did not use e-poll books?
We don't have that.
You don't have e-poll books? Okay.
So those were the only things, and I'll try and be at the next meeting, but I'm just trying to figure out if you guys come up with anything where us in the field at the precincts can actually help things go smoother down here. We're all for it.
Would you keep an eye on our agenda and come back when we have the discussion about voting centers versus precincts?
Yeah, because I really think that, even if we don't do it completely, having 5 polling places within, say, 10 blocks on one street's a little ridiculous.
Thank you.
You bet.
Yes, Robert.
Bruce, I would just point out that I think at least tentatively some of the discussions you and I have had were about having that vote center topic be topic for our next meeting.
Okay.
Which is?
That is
Next week.
next Friday. Let me double check that. That's what I recall our.
I thought I had the schedule with me, but I didn't bring it. So
Yes, I show meeting again next Friday, 10 a.m. at the same time.
I got a.
Obviously, we're going to be scrambling a little bit to get that agenda together quickly, but that's set now.
Did anybody else have any comments? I did want to add one thing. Bob Litz sent me a text message a little bit ago, said that they had 1,991 phone calls to the auditor's office on the last election day. So we had had a discussion about the confusion that was involved with, and all the calls that were made over from your precincts and all the other precincts looking for the proper places for everybody. So I just wanted to make that part of the record. So.
Another thing is maybe give the superintendents a laptop that's hooked into the Secretary of State's office so they can actually look it up without having to make the phone call.
It's an e-poll book.
That's why we
That's-
use e-poll books.
That'll be part of our
Exactly. You're
next.
describing them exactly.
Yes.
Just trying to fill in a little nudge there, you know.
If we had e-poll books, I was superintendent at Morningside.
Oh, Bev, could you come up and we appreciate this. Could you identify yourself and your position?
I'm Bev Chase, and I'm the election supervisor for Sioux Falls School District. We used e-poll books for our last 4 elections, and we will hopefully use them again this time. So,
We have a number of them
but
right here.
for the general election in November, I was superintendent at Morningside Community Center. And if we had had an e-poll book there, we could have looked up where the voters went instead of telling them, well, we've got to make a call. No, I don't want to make a call. Yeah, let me find out where you go. And it was usually just down 2 blocks that they had to go. But if we'd had the e-poll book, we could have sent them there. We would have known that. So that would have been very helpful for the last election. And basically, when they complained about not being able to vote anywhere, because they liked that, the voters that complained about having to go someplace else, they like being able to choose where they vote rather than have the government tell me where to vote. So they said, well, how do we know when it's going to be a vote center and when it's going to be this way? And I said, well, the spring elections, city and school elections, will always be vote wherever you choose, and the county ones, you'll have to go back to your precinct. That's how I explained it to my voters. So. But e-poll books on that day would have helped me send about, I bet I sent 200, 300 people away from that place that day because they had to vote 2 blocks down.
And you still would have sent them away, but you would have been able to quickly tell them where they should
I wouldn't
be.
have had to make that call, wait for the phone to answer, and then relay the message. You know, have them look them up when I could have already looked them up. They had their driver's license out anyway. I could have scanned it very quickly and gotten that name and precinct for them.
When we have our next discussion about, did you say something?
No, I want to say something before we end, but I'm sorry I jumped in.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that you'll join us for
I will.
these next meetings because we're
I'll be
looking
back.
forward to it. Yes, Julie.
I will say that, yes, you can point them in a different direction, and actually the e-poll books that we have spits out a little piece of paper and you can give it to them. It does not address the issue that they're having with their street master.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
It does not.
that would not have helped them with that either, because when the people call and they say, oh, this is where you go, and oh, well, my husband, he gets to vote here, those are the same issues that you're going to have to call the office on. So
Exactly.
they really need to be making sure your street master
We could have
is
eliminated
updated.
a whole lot of phone calls though on election day if we'd had a poll book to tell us where to send them.
We're going to have another meeting involved in this series of meetings we've got scheduled, talking about the e-poll books and the data and that side of the issue, and we'll be getting into that in more detail about all the problems that we've been having and the solutions that are coming along, and look forward to being involved with that with you too. Thank you, Bev. And Sue.
Can I just make a suggestion? I'm thinking ahead to what the outcome of this group is going to be. We're probably going to have maybe 4 more meetings, and then we're going to have to come up with something for our work. I have started writing down a list of potential recommendations to be made to either the auditor or the county commission, just the ones that interest me. I've got 6 of them already. But I would suggest perhaps that if each of us started now, just kind of jotting down things that we think we might want to have in a final report, then we've got a place to start when we get to the end and, okay, now what do we do? How do we crystallize what we've discussed? So just a thought.
Excellent suggestion. If you
Only got 4.
I'm an overachiever.
That's a great idea.
Yes, Robert.
I was just going to comment that I've kind of been thinking in the same line, that just using the minutes and the notes, I'm going to try and start building a framework though that I represent the discussions that you've had along, and then obviously as we get down, that's a tweaking process and a going back and forth. But I'm glad to hear that we're all we're all on the same page on that, because that will help immensely as we get down to the end. One other thing that I wanted to say is I should have asked for this when we were going through the discussion of the election webpage. Do I have your direction to set this live on the county website now? We will work with IT and do that if I do.
Yeah.
Do we have a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
It approved.
No.
No, that's right. I have to have a vote. Everybody.
All in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. All opposed?
All opposed?
Same sign. Do we want to keep the list ongoing, or do we want to send it in ahead of time? Who's going to write their summary? I think we talked about that at the beginning, and who we want to address it to, or?
Feel free to send, I'll defer.
I was just going to suggest, when somebody sends an email to that general mailbox, does that go to you as well?
I'll double check with IT on this, but my understanding is it comes to me and it pushes out. I haven't seen any yet, but
Well, it
I
pushes
think
out to who?
To all of us.
To all of you.
Oh.
So maybe if we have if we have something we want to share with the group, maybe the easiest way would just be to send to that email address that's up on the website. And
Yeah.
what was it again? Do you know?
I know it's linked off of the auditor's page. Well, if I don't,
It needs to be linked off this
will.
page.
It will.
Yeah. That might be the easiest way for us to just share things.
And then that's a question, if we do get an email to the group, who will be responding to that? Will that be Bruce as the chair then? Just so we all assume, we don't want to assume it's you and then nobody responds.
I would gladly send a message back through the address and let everybody know that I've responded and to that person and to each one of you, so that you all have the same information.
But that way we could get these in, and you could kind
Yeah.
of be working on that, whoever it's determined, and then we could, because I'm sure yours and mine are very similar.
and in advance, I would ask for all of your understanding as I'm preparing the draft minutes on this, because there's a lot of information that was passed back and forth today, and there probably will have to be some revisions, additions, and changes as we move through that process.
Well, I'd move on to the last parts here. Is there any other old business that anybody wants to bring up? Yes, Deb.
I would like to see item 8, the opportunity for public comment, moved up closer to the front of the agendas, for people don't have to, you can kind of guess that they'll be on the agenda sometime around 10 or so, as opposed to later when they're going to have to guess how long we've taken with our other items.
I think that's a good idea. Having spoken before City Council a number of times, I've appreciated being able to get in and get my points out and then go off and do something else while they do the mundane work of government. So appreciate everybody being here for this whole time, by the way.
I have some samples here from our last election of things that were rejected, if anybody on the committee wants to see them. Or
Can they be given to Robert to have him make
Scan them in
a PDF of it? And we get it as part of the minutes?
Sure. Can you do them in color?
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
scan in color.
Scan in color and then PDF.
Probably, yeah.
So then we'd be able to
And-
see.
Well, what's attached is, this is the report that comes off the scanner. Tells you the top bin, what we did with it, who the recreation team, which scanner, whether it was recreated or not, and then the ballots attached.
And can I make a comment from something I see? And I'm a little colorblind, but I see the distinct colors, that the blue, and I see some red and.
Yeah, we used red because we didn't think it scanned, but this is our blood ballot. Though it doesn't scan like blood, but it'll show you where the violation of a lot of the ballot stamps, I don't know if you need to recopy them all, were, and that you can get a ballot that, for no apparent reason, it just will not read.
If you could just put that as an entire PDF, because this helps everybody understand what we were going through downstairs. Even though it's from Pennington County, it would help everybody understand the issues that we were involved in. And then, is there any new business that we need to discuss before we're done? Then I would call for a motion for adjournment.
So adjourned.
So adjourned. Oh, there we go. I'm learning.
You have the power.
I have.